you use the world trade system to explain many of the things that is happening right now and offer some solution. Now, in your view, what is the role of the US dollar in the global trade system and how we get to where we are today?
The role of the US dollar is the same, also almost same as the role of English in the world trade.
Yes.
Everybody end up speaking English or broken English. And that's how the world operates.
That's right.
So if someone says, hey, let's replace dollar with something else, let's say euro or whatever, it's just like asking people, okay, let's stop using English and we all start using Chinese or something.
Good point.
It's very difficult.
Yes.
Once the recognition is so widely accepted that the dollar is a dollar, I think the role of the dollar will remain very large for years to come.
For years to come.
Of course, Mr. Trump is doing everything to destroy the value of the
I
dollar.
know, right?
And one of the key reasons why the dollar was so important is that Americans are willing to buy your product, from the global market.
Yes.
So if your final sales is in dollars, you want to make sure that when you buy things, suppliers, that should also be in dollars, so that you won't have a foreign exchange risk, right?
Yes.
So 20-some years ago, 30 years ago, Japan actually tried to internationalize Japanese yen. Says, wow, Japan is now the second largest economy in the world, and so we should be able to internationalize the Japanese yen to replace the dollar. Didn't work. Because if you are Southeast Asian producers of DVD players or computer chips, the final market is in the United States.
Yes.
So your final sales is in US dollars. So they want Japanese products, the key components from Japan, to be also denominated in dollars, so that this side and this side are both dollars, which case your foreign exchange risk is reduced. If Japanese start buying their products, then I'm sure they will say to the Japanese producers of key components, oh, please denominate that in Japanese yen, because our final sales will be also in Japan in yen. But Japan at that time was not buying enough. US is buying a lot. So everything still had to be traded in dollars.
Yeah.
So if China, for example, one day decide to really open up its market, like in the United States, and start buying things from around the world, then even if the Chinese government did nothing, renminbi will become an international currency.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to that. In your view, in your book, you mentioned that you believe the US dollar is way overvalued. And because of the overvaluation of the US dollar, it creates the direction of capital flow to go into the US, the US market. But then at the same time, because of the buying power of the US dollar, the US consumer tends to spend more. Now, and also you offer some parallels between the Plaza Accord in 1985 and what we are facing now today. I want to hear from you, would you expand this view for us and for the audience here?
What I'm seeing in the United States today, with the Trump and all these protectionist ideas, was something I saw exactly 40 years ago in the United States, 1985. At that time, the dollar was so strong, the dollar actually appreciated like almost 40% in 5 years, from 1980 to 85 on a real effective basis. And by 1985, the dollar was so strong, there was nobody in the United States who want free trade anymore. I was at the foreign exchange desk of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So I was right in the middle of that whole thing.
Yes.
And everybody was complaining. How come you don't push the dollar down? This is ridiculous. And because the dollar was so strong, with Japanese yen, it was 280 Japanese yen to a dollar. Today it's about 155, right? It was 280 then.
Yes.
Almost all US companies were demanding Washington to put on protection. Only 2 companies were still in favor of free trade. And you can imagine which two, the Coca-Cola and Boeing. Everyone else were for protectionism. And what happened was Japanese, Europeans also got worried. Because if at that time, US really went to protectionism, free trade would be dead. So in order to save free trade, Japanese Prime Minister at that time, Mr. Nakasone, and Japanese Finance Minister at the time, Mr. Takeshita, actually went to Washington and tried to convince President Reagan to intervene together to bring the dollar down. But President Reagan was a free trader and a free marketeer.
Yes.
So he said, no, we don't touch the market. The market knows best. Government should not get involved. So even though the Japanese worked hard on Americans kept on saying no, no, no. But by September 1985, the situation, the protectionist pressure in the United States got so large, finally, President Reagan said, okay, let's do it. And the Europeans are right behind the Japanese. So they came up with this Plaza Accord to push it down. And it worked beautifully. It went from 240 Japanese yen all the way to 120.
Yeah.
So wow, it worked. And in just 2 years, the protectionist pressure in Washington were all gone. I was amazed how quickly the protectionist pressure increased and how quickly protectionist pressure decreased, all because of the dollar.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that was the very last time US did anything about the dollar. Since 1987 to today, US government allowed the dollar to float again.
Yeah.
And as you said, the dollar became stronger and stronger.
I know.
And very many people in the United States start losing jobs.
Right.
Huge number, millions and millions. So Japanese were there first, and the Koreans, then and the Chinese. Now Vietnamese, everybody's selling goods to the US market, right? That's great for the consumers, but for those people who are competing, they were in very sad shape.
That's right.
Millions. But both Republicans and Democrats did nothing about this situation for over 35 years. Did nothing about the dollar, nothing about the protectionism. So until Trump came on board, if you are one of those people who lost jobs as a result of imports, you had no choice. You vote for Democrats, Democrats do nothing about the dollar. If you vote for Republicans, they are for free trade. They won't do anything for the trade. But when Trump came up, he says, let's put protectionism. Then the millions and millions of people start voting for Trump.
Right.
And that's how we got this guy in the United States.
That's right.
What that means is that we can no longer go back to the old world in a sense that now people in the United States feel that they have a choice. They have a choice to go protectionism. But we know from history that if you put on protectionism, we go back to the world that existed in the 1930s, where the world trade actually collapsed by something like 66%.
Yes.
Just imagine if China's trade collapsed by 66%. What do you think happened to the Chinese economy?
Unimaginable.
Unimaginable. Japan too, Korea, Germany, they're all everybody collapses. But we are right in the middle of that situation, with Trump talking about protectionism, raising tariffs, and so forth. I would like to see, 40 years ago, it was Japan that stood up and says, okay, we will accept strong yen in order to save free trade. Who benefited from that Japanese action 40 years ago?
Chinese.
It's China.
Yeah, Chinese.
If Japan did not take that action 40 years ago, and if we lost free trade in 1985, we're not going to have Chinese economy today the way it is, right?
Yes.
Free trade would be all gone. Everybody will be having all these tariffs up.
Yes.
So China benefited massively from this free trade, probably more than any other country in the world. I would like to see China play the role that Japan played 40 years ago.
So you want to see the Chinese yuan substantially appreciate.
Not just that, but for China to tell the Americans, do you really want to go the protectionist route? Because if you go the protectionist route and you have protections around, of course, American industries will be happy and there'll be more factories in the United States. But by definition, those products made in those factories are internationally uncompetitive, right? Because they are there only because of the protection. Do you want to have United States full of internationally uncompetitive companies, or you want to be part of the global competitive network? The only way to get to this one is to bring the dollar down.
Mm-hmm.
And if China, together with Japan, other countries, all agreed to push the dollar down and move their currencies up, then US will not have to do the protectionism. And at the end of the day, US will have internationally competitive industries.
Yes.
And if China starts offering it this way, I'm sure other countries would love to join China for that.
Mm.
And my suggestion will be that because Mr. Trump, unlike Mr. Reagan, does not believe in free trade. You know, Mr. Reagan did the plaza to save free trade. Mr. Trump thinks that free trade is not good to begin with. So we cannot ask him to be the leader on this thing.
Right.
But we could tell them that other countries will act to make your industries competitive.
That's right.
But because he's a tariff man, perhaps the best way to go is that, okay, you can have your tariffs, 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever goods that goes into the United States will incur 10% tariff, whether from China or from Germany or from Japan. But anything above 10%, let's do the exchange rate.
Right.
If China starts offering that, and if China asks other countries to join, my guess is other countries would love to join this Chinese leadership.
Yeah.
And then you effectively have a Plaza Accord 2.0.
Yes. And probably the Chinese yuan can be stronger than before. So part of the adjustment is through the tariff adjustment. But even with the 10% tariff,
Only 10% part.
yes. Even with 10% though, I think the US industries would be very difficult to compete with China, right? Because the Chinese advantage is not only because we invested very heavily in the high-tech manufacturing industries and cheaper labor, very well-educated workforce, but also because in some of the industries, like in some of the solar panel manufacturers, for example, the government actually heavily subsidized these industries, and it's seen as sort of anti-competitive behavior applied by the US. And also, secondly, I think with the Plaza Accord. Now, the version that is circulating in China, even though I know that you recommended this book, which we told the experience back then, right? So basically, it's the Japanese government, pressure the US government to do the revaluation of Plaza Accord. But the version of the story circulating in China is that because the US pressured the Chinese to revalue the Japanese yuan, and then because of such a huge appreciation of the Japanese yen, it basically collapsed the Japanese bubble and the Japanese economy. That's the version that is circulating in China. So it's conspiracy. Now, given that it has a certain sort of a listener buying into this conspiracy theory, so how likely do you see what your suggestion could happen in the coming months or years? That's question number one. And question number two really is that because the Chinese yuan is really undervalued. If you look at the real effective exchange rate for the Chinese yuan, it actually depreciated like 25% of over the past 5 years. Now, and because of this devaluation, in my view, it actually saved the Chinese export. I think that in part explains why the Chinese export is so strong these days, right? So it's still taking market share from our international competitors. Now, if you according to your theory, so if you propose taking 10% as a tariff adjustment and then the rest through the currency adjustment, and I think the Chinese yuan would appreciate at 7% easy, very easy, because ever since the first trade war in 2018, the U.S. levied more than 10% on the Chinese exports, and this time another, I don't know, 20%. But even after 2 rounds of tariff, the Chinese exports maintain its competitive edge relative to many other exports. And I think in part because of the very severely undervalued Chinese funds. So if you want to offer to take away this advantage from the Chinese exporters, what do you think would happen to the Chinese economy and the Chinese manufacturing industry?
Well, you just mentioned something very important in your long talk. One of them is the subsidy component.
Right.
I think these regional governments giving subsidies so that all the regions have their own supplier of electric vehicles and solar panels, that has to stop. Because that is creating so much oversupply. That's creating so much excess competition.
Yes.
What do you call involution comes from that factor, right? So that has to stop. And this is one of the challenges that central government will be facing, I think. How do you stop this system, which worked so well until fairly recently? I see that there is a value to that system before, in that China has a huge landmass. How do you develop this all at the same time? If it's a centralized system, it will be very difficult to develop that big piece of real estate. But China actually had a decentralized system, right, where each province can compete with each other for better economic performance. And they were actually given certain freedom that other provincial governments do not have in other countries.
Yes.
And that's the local government financial platforms.
That's right.
They actually were able to run budget deficit.
Yes.
Which is not possible for the state of California or Kanagawa Prefecture in Japan. Regional governments outside China cannot run budget deficits. But in China, they could.
Yeah.
So they actually run a budget deficit, build these infrastructure, and because of the hardworking people at the beginning at very low wages, China grew very rapidly. So that system, I think, had a value until maybe 10 years ago.
Yes.
But now, this is creating overcapacity everywhere. And now everybody wants to stop the Chinese imports from coming in.
Yes.
And what I think many entrepreneurs, seeing that Europe is against imports from China, United States is against imports from China, they feel depressed, right? Because even though they work hard, they have a great technology, if there's no market, it's useless.
Yeah.
Politicians tend to ask, can we make it? Businessmen ask, can we sell it? Right? This is a big difference. And for Chinese economy to grow and entrepreneurs to think of great future, China has to pay more attention on how to keep foreign markets open to you. And that was perspective that Japan did not have back in 1980s. That's why the yen went sky high and then we lost lots of industries. For China, I think it's very important that it takes the initiative to say free trade so that foreign markets will remain open to you. The way your government did in 1990s, I thought was brilliant. In every May in 1990s, there was a so-called trade conference in Washington. And at that time, it was US-Japan that was fighting.
That's right.
We had a very fierce trade war with the United States at that time. And the reason this meeting was always in May, early May, was that's the golden week for Japan.
I see.
So Japanese bureaucrats can travel to Washington to participate in this event. And so I was often asked to participate in this one. The morning is US-Japan. And on one side, these Americans are very upset with Japanese, and the other side, the Japanese bureaucrats, and they were fighting every step of the way. Then on the next afternoon, it's the Chinese and Americans. And the environment was completely different. Because at that time, Mr. Deng Xiaoping running the show, he basically allows so many foreign countries to come into China. So they are the ones who are fighting for China. So on the Chinese side, I actually went there to look. There was not a single Chinese face. Everyone was American.
Okay.
And they are telling the American labor unions, American senators and House of Representatives, we are doing this for the Chinese.
Right.
We are doing this. We are doing this. We are doing it. That's the kind of strategic thinking that is needed in an environment like this. Who is your friends? How many friends can you gather?
That's right.
Instead of when Trump does this and then we do that, Trump does that and we do that. That you don't make any friends. But Chinese market is large enough, I think, that the government should have a strategic mind. Okay, these areas, let the Americans have it. As long as they help us in Washington.
That's right.
You know, that kind of thinking, I think, is needed, not just for the exchange rate, but also for the
for the global trade.
global trade.
I think in recent years, the Chinese market becomes more open. Many of the industries that restrict foreign ownership, for example, insurance companies, fund management company, brokerage. So now that the foreign companies, foreign investors can actually independently own pieces of these companies. It didn't used to be the case. Even though China promised to open up everything back in 2000.
Yes.
But 20 years later, we're getting there. So slowly but surely. So I think the environment in China is improving for foreign investors.
You mentioned financial sectors.
Yes.
And we are in financial sectors,
Yes.
so of course you know a lot about it. But unfortunately, this industry of ours do not employ a lot of people. Whereas manufacturing employs lots of people.
Yes.
And so just opening insurance sectors
Right.
and this and
I see what you
that might not add to votes
Right.
in Washington.
Right.
But if you allow American manufacturers to enjoy the Chinese market, then you have millions and millions of votes.
Very, very good point.